All right, it looks like we have everyone so far. And hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Terry, and I'm the Content and Marketing Specialist with Catalyst Gem. I want to thank you all for coming today to our presentation on preparing for your IELTS exam. Our presenter today is Scott Johnston, who is the Managing Director at Swoosh English. Scott has been an IELTS teacher for many years, teaching students all around the world how to pass their IELTS exam on their first attempt. And today he'll be sharing expert tips on how to pass the reading, listening, speaking, and writing sections, and how Swoosh English will help you prepare to pass the exam the first time you take it. So now I'll pass it on to Scott, who will take you through the presentation.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session today. My name is Scott. I'm the Managing Director and IELTS teacher at Swoosh English. And thank you so much for giving me your valuable time today. We've got a great session coming up on passing your IELTS exam. So I know some people have said hello in the chat box. Once again, just let us know where you're from today in the chat box and let us know what you're looking forward to most in this IELTS session today, what you're looking forward to, and even let us know what your biggest IELTS challenge is. The team and I will be reading the comments and making sure that we're able to serve you as well as we can today. So let's just get on with the session, guys. While those comments are coming in, we're going to talk about how to prepare you for your IELTS exam. Can't wait to get into the session. So, what are we going to be doing today in this approximate 20 to 25 minute session? Well, first of all, we're going to share some tips about IELTS preparation with you. We're going to go through listening, reading, speaking, and writing tips to ensure that you're able to facilitate and conduct every part of the exam successfully. We're going to talk about the do's and don'ts of IELTS preparation as well, so that you do the do's and you don't do the don'ts. Let's just put them in front of you today so that you understand what is going to be successful and what is not. Finally, there will be a Q&A session at the very end as well. So just take note that the Q&A session will be at the very end. There will be a chance for you to ask me and the Catalyst Gem team questions about your IELTS prep, and they will be answered at the very end. So don't waste that valuable opportunity to have any of your burning IELTS questions answered. Let's get straight into the tips today, guys. First of all, IELTS reading. What are Swoosh English's top 5 tips for IELTS reading? Firstly, most reading activities will require you to have a general understanding. The word that we used is gist. So every reading text will require you to get an understanding about what you are reading. So you should skim the text first to get that general understanding. The key word here is skim. You can't be reading in detail. You can't be spending long at it because IELTS is highly time sensitive. So you can spend about 20 to 30 seconds reading your long texts, getting an understanding about what it is about, because that will aid you in your comprehension. By skimming, look at the title and look at the first paragraph item, your topic sentence. Secondly, it's important that you do not try to understand every word. Lots of IELTS students come to me and say, Scott, I don't understand everything that's being said in this text. Does that mean I can't pass? No. These texts, especially in the academic exam, are highly specialized. Not even I will know every single word. So if a native English speaker can't understand every word, and we're likely to score an 8 or a 9 in the exam, don't worry if you don't understand every word. What is important is that you deduce meaning from what you are reading. Third tip is to ensure that you identify key words in the questions. So in the IELTS exam, you will have a variety of different reading questions. There will be gap fills, there will be short answers, multiple choice, true, false, not given. It's really important that you understand exactly what the question is asking you to do, and that you know your keywords in the question stem so that you can compare that to what you are reading in the text itself. Accuracy is key. Now, alongside skimming, which is a speed reading technique, which allows you to get a gist of what's happening, it's also important that you scan the text as well. Scanning is another speed reading technique, but this time you're looking for details, such as names, numbers, dates, facts. Make sure you locate those keywords by comparing to the question stem and using that to get your answers in place as well. These techniques do require practice and preparation. Final tip I have for IELTS reading is to know and highlight the key question and answer words. This will be your best friend in the IELTS exam. Make sure that you're highlighting those important words in the question stem. By important words, I mean the content words, nouns, verbs, dates, facts, anything you can find that shows off a key point, you must underline that and do the same in the answer, because you will be comparing and paraphrasing them to what you actually see in the text. Skimming, scanning, keyword analysis, don't understand every word, use those to drive you forward in your IELTS reading. Let's now move on to IELTS speaking. The first tip I have for IELTS speaking is do not memorize answers. If the examiner sees that you are memorizing a rote answer for either part 1, part 2, or part 3, the maximum you will score will be a 5. Let me repeat that. If you memorize answers, the maximum you will score is a 5. The examiner wants to see that you are thinking on the spot and you are engaging with the language. Memorizing, they will know because there are systems in place. You need to get comfortable with being able to answer these questions on the fly. That is a true indicator of your speaking ability. Now, the second tip I have is be sure to give yourself some time to think, especially in part 2 and part 3, in which part 2 you have to do the long-term 2-minute answer, and part 3 you have the more discursive questions that you have to answer. So make sure you do give yourself time to think, and you can use a variety of techniques, such as asking the examiner to repeat or paraphrase the question. Do it once and once only, though, and don't do it for every question. Make sure, of course, that you use filling devices as well, such as, let me think a second, hold on a moment, that's a great question, I never thought about that before, but I will. Learn fillers and use them appropriately to give yourself that time to think, to structure your answer appropriately. As I also mentioned previously, this tip kind of runs into that, is to make sure you also ask the examiner questions if you don't understand. You might say, excuse me, can you repeat the question, please? Excuse me, can you clarify what that word means? As long as you don't overuse this, the examiner will help you clarify, because they don't expect you to be able to understand every word the first time. We're nervous. There might be new vocabulary thrown at us. So if you don't understand the question, make sure you ask to have it clarified before you do answer the question. And simply asking is key to that. Also, for speaking, it's really important that you use a range of grammar and vocabulary. By range, I mean simple grammar and vocabulary, all the way up to more complex grammar and vocabulary. What some IELTS students suffer from is they try and show off by using overly complicated grammar and vocabulary in their IELTS speaking. That results in very unnatural speech, which might not be very well joined together. Make it simple as possible and only complicate as necessary. And that's why that range is really, really important. So make sure that you get, of course, feedback on that to see if you're using that range appropriately. And of course, now the fifth piece of advice I have for IELTS speaking for you is to extend your answers as much as you can. That is especially appropriate for part 2, in which you have to speak for 2 whole minutes. Make sure that you extend that question that you have to answer as much as possible. Think of a second example as well. Think of various ways that you can extend that answer in part 2. Now, for part 3, there is a limit to that extension, but you should be aiming to speak for about 30 to 40 seconds per answer, but it should be coherent. First of all, address the question, express your opinion, give a supporting example, and then summarize your answer at the very end. You cannot be answering part 3 with simple one-sentence answers. Those are my tips for speaking. Let's now move on to listening. Tip number 1 for listening is to read the instructions very, very carefully. It seems obvious, right? You have time before you actually listen to your IELTS transcript to actually understand what the question is going to do. So what do you have to do? How many words and numbers should you answer? What are the questions? What are the gaps? What words surround that? Make sure you know exactly what you're doing before you go into listening mode, because you might not have time to think about it when you do. Tip number 2 is concentrate. This is a tricky one to actually tell you how to concentrate, but you should be focusing on that text and the writing in front of you. Try and ignore everything else that is happening and give your focus to ensure you hear it when you hear it. Third tip I have is to be aware of distractors. Now, here's the thing about IELTS is that if you are only listening for a detail, and as soon as you hear a detail that corresponds with the answer and you write it down, there might be something that happens afterwards that actually indicates that that was the wrong answer. For example, the transcript person will actually change what they are saying. They might go, sorry, that was wrong. Let me tell you this instead. That's a distractor. And if you fall for the distractors, it could be the difference between a passing and a failing score. So make sure you're listening around entire points before you write your answer down, and be aware of those distractors in your listening. Tip number 4 is to ensure that you are checking your spelling. You can miss very easy marks in the IELTS exam by misspelling something. So make sure that you do review your spelling at the end and ensure you've written it correctly. It could be the difference between a passing and a failing score. The fifth piece of advice I have for IELTS listening is to not leave any blank answers, right? There's no negative marking for IELTS. So the worst that you can get for a negative mark, a negative blank, is 0. You can't get a -1. So always give your best shot at answering the question, especially those multiple choice questions where you have 2 or 3 answers, for example. You might even get a mark for it. So leave nothing blank. You have nothing to lose, my friends. Now let's move on to arguably the hardest part of the IELTS exam, and that is writing. Top tip I have for writing is to, first of all, make sure you understand the task. For part 1 and part 2, you have to either compare a letter in general or a graph in academic. And then the second part 2, task will be writing an essay. What do you have to do? How many graphs are there, for example, in part 1? What are the key details that you have to write about? In task 2, are you writing about an opinion essay? Are you writing about a discursive, true, false, not given essay? Are you writing about problem solutions, etc.? Whatever it is, ensure you understand the prompt and what you have to do before you begin your writing. Likewise, it's really important that you plan your answer before you start writing. You should spend about 5 to 10 minutes at the very beginning, after you've understood the prompt, structuring your essay, developing your key points, developing your position, and then putting it into a coherent essay. When you start writing, you should have thought about what you're writing about, and you shouldn't be thinking about it as you go along, because that can result in a disjointed essay, which will then take away your marks from organization. Make sure, of course, that you're also organizing your writing into paragraphs. An IELTS essay should have ideally 4 to 5 paragraphs. You can let me know what you think the structure is in the chat box. Typically, there's the introduction and the conclusion at the end, with either 2 to 3 main body paragraphs expressing your views in the middle. They should be separated by a line for easy reading as well. So understand what you need to do to organize your IELTS essay. Also, make sure you know when and when not to write a conclusion. Can anyone tell me in the chat box which tasks you should write a conclusion for and which tasks you should not write a conclusion for? I'll await your answers coming in. I'll give you a few seconds and then I'll tell you exactly what you should do. But you're right. Task 2 always requires a conclusion. Essays require a conclusion, but I still see a lot of IELTS students writing a conclusion for task 1. You do not need to write a conclusion for task 1. So remember, conclusion task 2, no conclusion for task 1. Finally, like you spent all of your time beginning your IELTS writing process, make sure you have time at the end to check your writing. Read through it briefly. Does it make sense? Have you hit the word count? Are there any grammatical errors? Are there any spelling issues? Give yourself ideally 5 minutes at the very end of your IELTS writing time to review your writing. So the rough breakdown for your IELTS writing should be 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning, understanding the prompt, for example, for task 2, and then mapping out your structure. Approximately 30 minutes to write, and then 5 minutes at the end to review. You should not be writing for a full 40 minutes, guys. Practice this time and time and again so that you are ready for your big IELTS test on the day. So that's some of my top tips for IELTS with my 7+ years of being an IELTS teacher. Let's now talk about the do's and don'ts of IELTS preparation so that you do the do's and you don't do the don'ts, shall we say. First of all, the don'ts. If you can avoid it, try not to self-study for your IELTS exam. By self-study, I mean going away and doing your preparation yourself without expert structure, guidance, and feedback. This approach is much less effective than engaging in study with an expert teacher or an expert institution. And the results of self-study are typically a 20% first-time pass rate versus a 70% first-time pass rate if you study with an effective provider. The second tip is to not try and figure it out all on your own. I'm sure you're all very busy professionals in your lives, and it takes time for you to understand how to put everything together. If you're trying to find this free resource here and that free resource here and this free resource and put it all together, it can become overwhelming and it can become confusing. You spin your wheels and you don't develop your skills the way that you need to. As I said, there's also a lot of free online material out there. Some of it is very good, don't get me wrong. It's made by experts, but a lot of it also isn't very good as well. So in relation to this free online material, make sure, of course, you are researching the institution who is giving you the material. It might be a trial, but if they have no record, I would avoid that and only go to the expert institutions that have a track record of getting you the support. Some of the bad material can actually be wrong and set you back on your IELTS preparation versus the good quality material that you can find. Also, something that you should not do is use templates and shortcuts. We talked a bit about this in the speaking tips that you should not memorize answers. If you find an institution which says, use this cheat, use this shortcut, use this hack, and you will pass IELTS. Take this template and follow it for your speaking. Take this writing template and you'll pass IELTS writing. It is wrong and it is false. There is no cheat, there is no shortcut, and there is no hack to passing the IELTS exam. All it takes is expert support and guidance, time, energy, effort, and motivation. You need to put in the work to pass and prepare. Likewise, you can't memorize IELTS writing answers and you can't memorize IELTS speaking answers. You will not pass using these templates and shortcuts. Also, you probably have quite a number of friends who have maybe taken the IELTS exam before and maybe they've passed. And that's fantastic. It's really nice to have people who can motivate you. But I warn you not to use or rely purely on non-expert feedback. The reason why is because everyone's got their own strengths and weaknesses for the exam. But an expert will be able to tell you what your strengths are and your weaknesses are, and then help you tailor your approach to improving your weaknesses and doubling down on your strengths. That's why experts help you pass cheaper, sooner, and quicker. If you're not confident, don't take the exam. I cannot stress this highly enough. If you're not confident, don't take the exam. Most candidates come to Swoosh English saying, my IELTS exam's in 2 weeks' time. I've never studied. I hope to pass. That's the reason why the pass rate is so low, because it takes longer than you might think preparing and passing for this exam. So if you do not know what your scores were going to be on the day, you shouldn't even be thinking about taking the exam. Rather, prepare first and only take the exam when you are ready. And you'll know you're ready from your mock exams results and your expert teacher support. But ultimately, don't let all of this get in the way. Positivity, optimism, and believing that you can do it because you want to pass this exam is really important. Everyone in this room today can pass the IELTS exam with the right approach and the right mindset. I promise you that, because I've seen thousands of students in my time as an IELTS teacher think about giving up on their dreams because they haven't passed. All it took was a change in how they approach things, and then they got what they wanted. You can do that too. So let's now finish off by moving on to the do's, the things that you should do for your IELTS preparation. First of all, know your scores in advance. Know what you're going to do before you even do the IELTS exam. Take a mini mock exam with Swoosh English, for example. We will give you your scores today, show you where you're at, and give you an indicator about how far or how close you are to passing your IELTS exam. That gives you a baseline for you to start preparing and hopefully get to the area you need to be in the time you need it to be. Know the format of the exam. Know how long each section is, what types of questions you have to answer, how to write an essay, how to write a graph, how to answer part 2, etc., etc. You don't have time to think about this on the day of the exam, so ensure that you've got plenty of practice to go into autopilot on the day. Likewise, when you've actually started off by, first of all, taking that initial benchmark exam, do more mock exams again and again and again, see if you're improving. But make sure you're getting feedback on those exams. Without the feedback, you don't know if you're improving whatsoever. Speaking is I know a lot of you are from Africa, various African nations, and you're very, very confident speakers. I know that from my IELTS experience, but you still need to practice in the IELTS format. So do plenty of speaking role plays in part 1 and part 2 and part 3. Develop your skills and get that expert feedback. Writing is the area of English language learning which has the lowest results. If you're a 7 in your speaking, your reading, and your listening, you're probably a 5.5 to a 6 in your writing. So you need to focus on this for the exam. And that's why I recommend you do at least 10 writing corrections in part 1 and part 2 to see if you are ready before you are ready, because it's usually the one area of the exam candidates fall down on. Focus on your writing. It's really important that you join live group classes as well, either in person or face-to-face. Get expert guidance from expert teachers like us at Swoosh English. Let us show you the way, give you the skills that you need, and motivate you to achieving your IELTS passing dream. It's also really important that you have a goal and a study plan. You may have heard of the phrase, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. You can't just join a course and study 5 minutes a day and hope for the best. You need to have this planned out. I want to pass the IELTS exam in 4 months. I'm going to study 2 hours this day and 2 hours the next day and 5 hours that day. I'm going to learn this and have your success journey mapped out. That is the way to ensure that you will be as ready as you can over time. It's also nice to have dedicated support on hand when you have those inevitable questions about your IELTS preparation and you get stuck at something. Well, the team at Swoosh English and I will be more than happy to help you out with any queries that you have 24/7. It's also nice when you can practice with other students, right? There's a nice community feeling knowing that there are others going through the same journey as you, and we'll match you with a study buddy and help you with your practice by matching you with other students in a live class scenario. Get expert IELTS teacher feedback. It is highly recommended that you do, because it will make your journey to IELTS passing quicker, cheaper, and much less stressful. But ultimately, it's over to you to be committed and dedicated to your studies and believe that you can pass. That is how it'll happen. So in essence, practice, get feedback, improve. It's called the learning cycle. If you don't practice, you can't improve. If you don't get feedback, you don't know what to improve on. If you don't practice and get feedback, then you simply won't improve. And you need to improve to get your IELTS score of 7.5 or above. So hopefully you've enjoyed our free demonstration today about what we can do. We would love to ultimately give you more expert tips and feedback for your IELTS exam, by joining another one of our free IELTS sessions. So it's called our free IELTS FastPass Masterclass, and we run these all the time. The Catalyst Gem team are going to drop this link, www.swooshenglish.com/IFP. That's www.swooshenglish.com/IFP into the chat box. Click on the link in the chat box and get signed up for our next free IELTS Masterclass. What will we cover? Well, we're going to talk about the secrets to your preparation and focus on exactly what you need for IELTS success to avoid the common scenario of taking the exam 3 or more times. Remember, most candidates only pass this exam 1 out of 5 times. It's not good enough. We want to give you the best chance of passing your IELTS exam on the first attempt. We'll give you more expert IELTS exam tips and tricks to help you ace your writing, speaking, listening, and reading subtest. We'll help create unstoppable confidence in your IELTS preparation journey, which could save you thousands of dollars on unnecessary IELTS fees. We don't want to be spending lots of money on IELTS exam fees when we don't have to. And there will be a live interactive Q&A session at the end with myself or another expert teacher who will help you out with any questions that you have from the session, plus much, much more. So I'm going to leave this on the screen, guys. Our free expert IELTS FastPass Masterclass. The link will be in the chat box, www.swooshenglish.com/IFP. One more time, www.swooshenglish.com/IFP. Click on that link and get signed up for our next free masterclass. Once again, it's completely free, and let the Swoosh English team and I show you the way to IELTS success.
Thank you so much for that informative presentation, Scott. I think we all learned quite a bit today about the IELTS process. If you have any questions today that you'd like to ask, please enter them in the Q&A section. And Scott, I believe we do have the link down in the hosts and panelists section. If you could just share that with everyone, that'd be perfect. Thank you. All right. So if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A section and we'll be sure to answer them. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask you, Scott, what section do you think is the most difficult or most important of the IELTS exam?
That's a really good question, Daniel. And in essence, actually, all sections are important and all sections can be the most difficult. It depends a lot on how you've learned English to this point, what areas you focused on, and what areas you might have neglected. So put focus on everything. However, statistics show that the most failed part of the IELTS exam across the world, across age ranges, across demographics, is the writing part of the exam. And the reason why is because writing is typically the most complicated skill to learn. So as I said earlier, even though you might be scoring 6s in your listening, your speaking, and your reading, your writing, unless you've really focused on that, and to be honest, most candidates don't because they focus on speaking and listening English, and the writing score will be lower than that. So I really emphasize that everyone places emphasis on their writing practice for their IELTS exam. But at the same time, please don't neglect the other skills. Everything needs to be passed to get you the passing score you need.
Absolutely. That's a great tip. So, I know you spoke about confidence during the exam, especially during the speaking section. So what can people do to either gain more confidence in the speaking or the writing sections?
Well, the first thing that I will say is to go into your IELTS preparation with a really positive mindset. Positivity in everything that you do and believing that you can do it. For example, imagine that you've already passed the IELTS exam. How will that feel to you? If you can put that forward into your preparation and go into it positively, you'll learn better and you'll have a much nicer time with your IELTS preparation. So once you've obviously gone in with a positive mindset, the key to any IELTS preparation program is structure, guidance, and expert feedback, as well as dedication to your studies. You need to put in the work yourself to prepare. As I said, there's no shortcut to developing the skills you need to pass your exam. So you need to put in the hard work. But at the same time, it's really important that you put in the hard work in a direction towards success. As I said, if you're finding all of this free material online, or you're not really studying as appropriately as you can, you might be wasting your time. You're not studying smartly when you should also be studying smartly as well as effectively. That's why I highly recommend, from my years of being an IELTS teacher, myself, that you invest in a quality program that will show you the way, will minimize your stress, and give you the much higher chance of passing your IELTS exam the first time or the next time, versus taking it typically 4 or more times. Most candidates take the IELTS exam. So really, we want you to pass as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible. And actually investing in a prep course will minimize your costs, because the main costs that I can see from anyone passing their exam are taking the exam 2, 3, 4 or more times. So invest in yourself and then give yourself the easiest time preparing by putting in the hard work and following expert guidance.
That's amazing advice right there. And I think that answers our next question. Someone asked, what is needed to get this exam done and passed once? And I think that you just answered that, investing in, a program that will help you get that done. So next, let's talk about how many hours of preparation is required for the IELTS exam.
Good question. Now, if you look at this from the CEFR perspective, and that is called the Common European Framework of Reference, maybe some of you guys who are in this session today are aware of the CEFR, but you hopefully at this point have been given a level on your English abilities. And hopefully you all are at what I would say is B2 level, upper intermediate. You'll probably need a 7 or a 7.5 in your IELTS exam to further your preparation, to follow, for example, Catalyst GEM services in placing a university of your choice. 7 to 7.5 is typically needed. That is a C1 on the CEFR, which is from upper intermediate all the way to advanced. How long does it take for you to go up one level on the CEFR from upper intermediate to advanced? There's no sure guidance to this, but as a general rule of thumb, it takes about 200 hours of effective preparation to go from one level in the CEFR to another. For example, a 5.5 to a 7 or 7.5, 200 hours of effective preparation. So the only way that you will know is by, first of all, assessing yourself and knowing what your score would be today if you were taking the IELTS exam. If you got a 5.5, you'll need about 200 hours of effective preparation. If you got a 6.5, but half that, maybe 100 hours of preparation would be good enough. If you got a 7, but 50 hours of effective preparation would be enough. So that's why one of my biggest pieces of advice today is don't take the exam unless you are ready. Don't try and guess if you're ready yourself. Know from taking a readiness test from a provider like Swoosh English, who will actually give you feedback on your exam and give you a level that you're at so you know where you need to go. And then follow the guidance across the CEFR, which we will teach you in our courses to ensure that, okay, within this amount of time, if you study effectively, you should be ready for your IELTS exam.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. So I know that this link that we entered in the chat here is offering a free FastPass masterclass, and I wanted to invite everyone to click that link and check that out. But is there anything that you want to tell us about the FastPass masterclass before they do?
Sure, Daniel. So in essence today, we only scratched the surface of getting you ready to begin in your IELTS preparation. There's a lot more advice that we want to go into those sessions, such as we give more tips, we give more demonstrations of speaking, writing, listening abilities. We invite you to actually have a chance to do a free speaking practice with us in the class. We talk a lot about the importance of mindset in your preparation. We talk you through various student journeys and what it takes for a student to pass versus why a student wouldn't pass, to give you all the information that you need to truly understand, I now know what to do to get ready for my IELTS exam, and hopefully Swoosh will lead me in the way. So I can't wait to host that session for you guys next and to really help you understand what it takes for you to get your IELTS pass first time or next time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if anyone else has any questions, please enter them in the Q&A section right now. We'll give it another couple minutes to answer any questions, and then we'll sign off. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask, I know you emphasized in the writing section when you should write a conclusion and when you shouldn't write a conclusion. I wanted to clarify a little bit in that area.
Sure. So rule of thumb simply is that you'll have to do 2 different types of writing in your IELTS exam. IELTS General, which most of you probably aren't taking, but I'll say anyway, involves a letter for task 1 and an essay for task 2. Academic, which most of you will be taking for university admissions, involves a chart or graph analysis for task 1 and then an essay for task 2. Lots of candidates believe they should write a conclusion for task 1. Don't write a conclusion for task 1. If you do, your structure will not be appropriate and you might only score a 5 for your task achievement. And you need to be scoring a 7 in each to get that passing score. So don't write a conclusion for task 1, but for task 2, a conclusion is essential. You must write a conclusion. However, you also need to know what exactly a conclusion should consist of. A conclusion, free tip guys today, should not include any new information. It should be a short 2 to 3 sentence piece of writing at the end that summarizes your viewpoints. Do not write any more information at the end of that. Use it as a summary at the very, very end.
Perfect. That's a great tip. So I have one question that just came through, and it says, how long does the examination take?
Okay, thanks, Nelly, for your question. Can you just clarify what you mean by that? Do you mean how long the exam is, as in how long does the IELTS exam last? Or do you mean how long preparation for your exam should be? Let me know exactly what you mean by that question, and I'll be happy to answer that.
I think she meant how long the exam itself takes. I think we went over the preparation just a bit earlier there.
Sure. So I'll answer the question based on that. But Nelly, you can let me know if you want me to answer the other question. The IELTS exam in total is 2 hours and 45 minutes. So it's quite a long time, and it can be quite exhausting if you're not prepared to do that length of concentration in one sitting. That's why it's really important that you're doing mock exams in advance of taking the IELTS exam so that you know exactly what to do in the day. Your concentration is good. Your stamina is there. You prepared for it like you do any other test, for example, like a driving test. The good news is that you don't have to do that all in one sitting. The speaking test is separate to the reading, the listening, and the writing tests, but you will have to do the reading, listening, and writing tests in one sitting. And that's still 2.5 hours of concentration and studying.
They came back and asked, how long does it take to prepare for the examination?
Okay. Good question, Nelly. So in essence, my answer to that question is, how long is a piece of string? And you can't answer that question, right? Because string is different lengths. It might take someone 2 weeks to prepare for the exam. It might take someone 6 months to prepare for the exam. How you will know how long it will take you to prepare for the IELTS exam is knowing what your level is. If you were taking the IELTS exam today, what would you score? And the closer you are to your passing score, the less time it will take. But the further away you are, the more time it will take. Likewise, it also depends on how effectively and how dedicatedly you are studying. So really what you should do straight away, Nelly, is get yourself assessed. Take a readiness test and come to the FastPass Masterclass with us, and we'll show you how, give you a chance to even do some speaking practice in our FastPass Masterclass to find out more. Every one of our students, the first thing they will do is they will do a readiness test. They'll do a mini exam like they were taking the IELTS exam and get their scores like they were doing the IELTS test today. We give you feedback on that ability and then give you a study plan according to how long it might take you, depending on how effectively and how long you will study. We'll give you a clear pathway to IELTS preparation success, And that is what is needed. To everyone, my last piece of advice based on that is, if you are asking questions like, how long does it take? Or can I take the test tomorrow? You don't know. And if you do not know, don't even think about taking the exam until you know you are ready. And you will only know you are ready if you have been assessed on your skills and got expert scores from expert teachers. Then you will know you're ready. Otherwise, it's a big gamble. And that's the reason why most IELTS candidates do take the exam 4 or more times, because they're taking the exam without knowing they are ready.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. So thank you everyone for showing up to learn more about the IELTS exam preparation. I want to invite you once again to click the link sent to everyone in the chat and check out the Swoosh English Masterclass. At the end of, or within 24 hours, you will receive an email with a recording of this webinar, as well as the link mentioned below as well. So once again, I wanted to thank you, Scott, for this excellent presentation. I think we've all learned a lot of valuable information here.
Thank you very much for having me, Daniel. And yeah, it's been a pleasure hosting to your audience. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, we'll go ahead and end the webinar now. And I hope everyone has a great time studying and passing their IELTS exam.
Thank you, Daniel. And thank you everyone for attending. Make sure you come and join us for the FastPass Masterclass. Hope to see some of you again very soon.
All righty.